Welcome back to the TwinSpires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson, joined by James Scully and Darren Zacali to look back on an exciting weekend of racing, including an upset in the Haskell Stakes, big performances from Nest and Wet Paint, Anazette winning the San Clemente, and some impressive two-year-olds at Saratoga. We got a lot to cover this weekend, so let's start with the biggest race of the weekend, which is the Haskell, and a surprise winner in Go Rocket Ride at 12-1. How does his Haskell victory impact the three-year-old picture? We'll start with James.
I think it adds another major contender for champion three-year-old male to the three-year-old to the picture. Go Rocket Ride really was impressive. I thought he made only his fourth career start, broke his maiden at 6 furlongs in late January in his career debut. And I thought he sort of had a perfect trip, non-threatening second in the San Felipe. I thought his comeback race in the Firm was okay, but it wasn't fast and he didn't beat much. And I thought he took a huge step forward. I loved how he showed another gear on the stretch. And it's a situation where the three-year-old crop looks pretty strong to me, better than the older horse division. The three-year-old male pitcher could be settled in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think a three-year-old is going to have a great chance to win it. And if you look at Go Rocket Ride, Mage, Arcangelo, Forte, possibly somebody else like Scotland or another horse could come along. All those horses will have the credentials to be named champion if they win the Breeders' Cup Classic. Darren, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is a year where we've had 9 Grade 1 races for three-year-olds. That includes the Belmont Derby on turf and the Woody Stevens going 7 furlongs. We've had 9 different winners. So it goes to show you that it's a completely wide open crop. It's a competitive crop. I do think it's a crop of good quality as well. Likely the Travers, the Pennsylvania Derby, and ultimately the Breeders' Cup Classic are going to be the deciding factors in who ends up capturing divisional honors. I thought Mage ran credibly to be second at the top of the stretch. I thought he was a winner. Might have come up a little bit short. Maybe needed a little bit more training because we do know the connections were going back and forth on whether or not to run him in this spot or train him up to the Travers. They have always said that the Travers was their ultimate goal for the summer. So you have to think that he's likely to take a step forward, and this race is probably going to give him a little bit more foundation moving into that. Remember, he's only had 5 races lifetime, so he's still a pretty lightly raced colt himself. It's wide open. I put a poll on Twitter asking people what they thought of this three-year-old division in terms of who they thought was going to capture it. Mage was a slight winner with 33%, Forte a little bit under 28%, Arcangelo right below 25%, and Other got 15% with a series of different write-ins. So it goes to show you that everyone thinks this is a wide open division.
Yeah, I voted for Mage in your poll, by the way, Darren. I think he's slightly ahead at the moment. And, you know, the part owner of Mage, Ramiro Restrepo, was saying he was over the moon with his performance and had the same feeling with the Florida Derby. Obviously, Mage came back and won the Kentucky Derby after that. So maybe we'll see something similar with the Travers. If you had to put money on it right now, though, do you have any sort of feeling, either of you, who you think is going to end up ultimately winning?
I don't. And to be honest with you, like Arabian Night, who I faded in the race, and I had a trifecta bet of 1-3 with 1-3-4 with all, and I thought for sure Extra Anejo and others were going to go by him for third. So much to my chagrin, the favorite stayed third. But it was interesting that he looked completely done at the 8th pole. And then he ended up being a clear-cut third by about 3 lengths over Extra Anejo and was actually gaining ground towards the end of the race on Mage for second, which I thought was interesting. So I wouldn't write him off long-term yet either, but I don't. My vote would have been for 2 fills, but unfortunately he's on the sidelines and heading to the breeding shed due to a career-ending injury. So, James, I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other yet.
I don't either. And Saturday's Jim Dandy is going to play a part in that decision as well. I think that race will be important and just provide another, give us an indication, especially on Forte moving forward at a mile. Because really, these horses right now looking good at a 1 1/8. But the key races to come, at least the Travers and the Breeders' Cup Classic, will be at 10 furlongs.
Well, real quick, Go Rocket Ride was a surprise in this race, but there was a very hot pace set up that ultimately led to him being able to come through. Do you think going forward, he's probably going to the Pacific Classic, so do you think we should be paying more attention to this horse? Either of you?
Oh, I do, definitely. I think if he gets a win over older horses before any of the other three-year-olds, and he's a dual Grade 1 winner, he automatically gets a leg up over everybody else. And, unless Forte comes out and wins the Travers, you would have to say Haskell Pacific Classic makes him the leader of the division until proven otherwise. So definitely a win in the Pacific Classic, depending on the outcome of the Travers, could absolutely propel him into the number one spot.
Yeah, I concur completely. And that Pacific Classic, you're going to have the top West Coast Breeders' Cup Classic horses in there possibly. So it'd be a huge win if he did win it.
Let's move over to Saratoga, where 3-year-old fillies raced in the Coaching Club American Oaks. We had Wet Paint bounce back after losses in the Kentucky Oaks and the Monomoy Girls Stakes. Does this launch her into divisional leadership, Darren?
Yeah, I guess maybe, it's hard to say. I'm not sure she's still the best. She did get a pretty good setup, and I thought more so than I expected, given the scratch at Hoosier Philly. I thought that the pace would have been much slower than it was, to be honest with you. And she did good work to kind of chase them down in the stretch and was able to pick them up where Hoosier Philly kind of got away from her in the previous race. I suppose she's the leader, but at the same time, you do have a Kentucky Oaks winner that came back to win again in her subsequent start. So you could certainly make the case that she's the leader as well. It's similar to the 3-year-olds. I think it's wide open at this point. I don't think you saw the best of Gambling Girl that day. I think she probably needed the race and will probably get better as the races move forward. And Southlawn's performance, I thought, was just another complete enigma, and I have no idea what to make of her at this point, James.
Yeah, and I'm not making much out of Southlawn until I see her run a good race and another good race outside Fairgrounds. Yeah, I definitely thought that race helped Wet Paint regain some lost luster in that. Now, that was her first Grade 1 win, so, I mean, she's got to keep on winning races. And unlike the 3-year-old male division, I think the older distaffers, they're better than the 3-year-old fillies. Those are the horses to fear in the Breeders' Cup distaff. So she's going to need to take advantage of a race like the Alabama. The Alabama would be big. Her main rival, to me, is Pretty Mischievous, who's a Godolphin filly. I don't think she's going to be targeting the distaff. So she's got the 7-furlong test ahead. And if she keeps winning, Wet Paint won't have any margin for error. But I thought that was an encouraging performance. Let's see what she does running against better next time in Alabama. Ashley.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to add to James's point, last year Nest went into the Breeders' Cup Distaff, Secret Oath went into the Breeders' Cup Distaff, seemingly as legitimate players in that field. This year, this 3-year-old group going up against Nest, Clairiere, and Secret Oath, they have a lot of ground to make up on the older mares division. So I do think that once we get through Alabama and Cotillion, you're going to have a pretty good idea who the 3-year-old filly champion is.
Yeah, and Wet Paint's trainer Brad Cox said that he actually thinks Pretty Mischievous is probably slightly ahead, but of course with the Alabama Breeders' Cup distaff, that could give Wet Paint the edge at the end. So we have a lot of the season left to figure it out. But let's talk about Nest, who won 3-year-old filly last year, and of course finally made her debut this season and beat Clairiere in the SHUVEE. What are your thoughts on Nest's comeback win here, James?
I thought it was very encouraging. The dynamics of the race favored her. She's got more tactics. She's got more positional speed, tactical foot than Clairiere. And we could talk about the dynamics of that race. Clairiere won't potentially be at such a disadvantage in future engagements. But I do want to point out one area of concern surrounding Clairiere off of this race. She's got 8 career wins. 7 of the 8 have come at a mile and a 16th distance. Only 1 win from 7 attempts at a mile and an 1/8. Now, granted, she won the SHUVEE last year, but I thought Mouthat was off form on that race. And she's run well to place. I mean, a head third in the Breeders' Cup Distaff was a monstrous effort last fall. But I do think that I'm a little bit like, right now thinking Nest, I prefer her for this year's distaff and moving forward, because I think she might be a little better at a mile and an 1/8 than Clairiere. But all that will be decided in future races. Darren, what are your thoughts on the 2 horses exiting the SHUVEE?
Obviously, I completely agree. The dynamics of the race certainly did favor Nest. She's had that similar spot in her 3 tries at Saratoga, where she's able to make that move in the midpoint of the far turn, where she gets separation on the field and turns the lights out on everybody. And when you're going up against 4 horses or 3 other rivals, I should say, in a race like that in the SHUVEE, it gives her a huge advantage. Now, that being said, we saw that Clairiere had to overcome similar issues in previous tries, one against Secret Oath, where she was able to run her down from what seemed to be an impossible spot. And I would contend that perhaps running Nest down is a little bit different than running Secret Oath down at this point. The concern that I have for Clairiere is also, I don't necessarily know how much bigger the fields are going to get in these races. I mean, even when you get to the Breeders' Cup Distaff, if that field has Clairiere, Nest, Secret Oath, Wet Paint, how many other older fillies and mares are going to try in that spot? Maybe one or two from California. I could see that being a relatively short field again, where the dynamics favor Nest, moving forward, which could make things even more difficult for Clairiere, even as you expect her to face more rivals. It's not going to be a 4-horse field, but I don't think there's going to be 11 lining up in the Breeders' Cup Distaff with some kind of a wild pace setup either.
And these two are likely to meet next in the personal ensign at Saratoga. And another thing to note is Clairiere, I believe, only has 1 win in 5 tries at Saratoga, but Nest excels at this track. So the advantage may be in her corner going forward. Well, was there anything else that stood out to you all this weekend? Darren, do you want to talk a little bit about the West Coast?
Yeah, over there in the San Clemente, Anisette, which is one of my favorite liqueurs to put in a nice espresso here in New York City. I have not really been bullish on the West Coast turf runners. The dirt runners have come over and had their way with some of the East Coast dirt runners in recent years. But turf has always been a bit of a different story, and the West Coast horses have, from the turf standpoint, have been a cut below. This horse may be a little bit different, though, than the previous turf runners we've seen come out of California. I don't necessarily know what he beat in that race, and somebody took exception to that on Twitter, saying, well, when you beat Ocean Club, who runs second, what difference does it make? And I don't really think it mattered who ran second. You could run that race 100 times and get 14 different horses to run second. There was only going to be one winner. The turn of foot was explosive. I think this is a highly talented filly, and I think moving forward, she's going to have a major impact on not just the 3-year-old filly division, but also the filly and mare turf division as well.
What about you, James?
Yeah, I want to just mention real quick a maiden race at Saratoga, race 7 on Saturday. I thought that was a race that had a bunch of horses in there that looked like they were bought at auction for, potentially classic races, 2-turn races. It's a 6 furlong maiden special weight for 2-year-olds. I thought the winner, Valentine Candy, Justified Cold out of a Candy Ride mare, ran well, leading wire to wire for Steve Asmussen. But I look for a lot of upcoming winners from that race. I thought the runner-up and third-place finisher, Protective, ran second for Todd Pletcher. Medaglia d'Oro Cold out of a multiple Grade 1 winning Empire Maker mare, Grace Hall. The third-place finisher, Anointed, a Justified Colt out of a Frankel mare that is a full sister to Decorated Invader. 6 furlongs looks too short for those horses based on pedigree. I thought they ran really well for second and third for Todd Pletcher. And I'll mention 2 others to watch. Dive Bomber ran 5th, Omaha Beach Colt for Brad Cox. I think he'll improve off that effort. And Daily Grind, a Medaglia d'Oro Colt for Dwayne Lucas, missed the start. I thought ran okay for 7th. I just think that will be a key race moving forward. Race 7 at Saratoga on Saturday, Ashley.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have this week on the Roundtable. You can catch us next Tuesday. We'll be back with more to talk about from an exciting weekend coming up. And of course, on Thursday, check out our best bets and fades of the weekend with our TwinSpires jury, and head to TwinSpires for a plethora of offers from Darren's team to help you win even bigger at the track this weekend. We'll see you next time.